Captain Sarah Mitchell stood by her plane on the runway, watching other pilots pass, their smirks and whispered comments hard to ignore. Her jet looked nothing like the sleek, modern fighters surrounding it. Its paint was a peculiar matte gray, appearing to swallow light instead of bouncing it back. The aircraft's shape was equally strange, with unusual angles and surfaces unlike any standard design. "Look at Mitchell's flying coffin!" Captain Jake Harrison scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did she build that thing in her garage?" Sarah brushed off the remarks, just as she had for 6 months since being assigned this prototype. She had become the laughingstock of Falcon Air Base. Fellow pilots called her jet everything from the flying brick to Mitchell's mistake. Some even joked that the military used her as a guinea pig for experimental junk. Truthfully, Sarah didn't know much about her aircraft either. She'd received minimal details. Transferred to the Special Projects Division, all she knew was it was highly classified, experimental, and she was the only pilot cleared to fly it. The technical crew working on it were tight-lipped, always speaking in hushed tones, stopping conversations when she approached. What made it worse was her jet's seemingly ordinary performance during routine flights. It flew well enough, but nothing impressive. It didn't break speed records or perform incredible stunts. To observers, it looked like a poorly designed aircraft that somehow made it past the blueprints. Colonel James Wright, the base commander, had called a meeting for all pilots that morning. As Sarah entered the briefing room, dozens of eyes fixed on her. Whispers began instantly. Someone quipped about hoping her science project wouldn't fall apart during the demonstration flight scheduled for later that week. "Settle down, everyone," Colonel Wright said, though Sarah noticed he didn't defend her aircraft. "We have important visitors coming to evaluate our squadron's capabilities. I want everyone at their best." After the meeting, Sarah walked back to her hangar alone. Chief Mechanic Rodriguez was there, running his hands along the aircraft's strange surface. He was one of the few who treated her with respect, though he never discussed her jet's technical details. "Don't let them get to you, Captain," Rodriguez said quietly. "Sometimes the most important things don't look impressive from the outside." Sarah nodded, but the constant mockery was draining her. She'd been a top pilot at her previous base, flying conventional fighters with skill and precision. Now she felt like a joke, assigned to what everyone believed was a failed experiment. She wondered if her career was being quietly ended, if someone wanted her to fail. That evening, reviewing flight manuals in her quarters, Sarah received an encrypted message. It was from someone identified only as Project Director. The message was brief. "Trust your aircraft. Trust yourself. Tomorrow changes everything." The next morning brought news that unsettled everyone. Intelligence reports indicated enemy aircraft near the border. These weren't ordinary planes, but advanced stealth fighters that had caused problems for months. They appeared on radar briefly, then vanished, making them nearly impossible to track or engage. The base went on high alert. Conventional fighters launched, but Sarah was told to remain on standby. She watched from the control tower as squadron after squadron took off, their engines roaring with purpose. Her own jet sat silently in its hangar, looking more pathetic than ever next to the impressive military display. Hours passed without success. The enemy aircraft appeared and disappeared like ghosts, always one step ahead. Frustrated radio chatter filled the airwaves as pilots reported losing contact with targets they'd barely detected. As the day wore on, it became clear conventional aircraft weren't enough. The enemy used technology making them almost invisible, and traditional tactics failed. Sarah saw the stress on Colonel Wright's face as he coordinated the failed intercept attempts. Just before sunset, the enemy aircraft made their boldest move yet. They appeared on radar, heading directly toward a major city. Their intentions were unclear, but threatening. Every available conventional fighter was already airborne, and none had managed a successful engagement. That's when Colonel Wright made a decision that stunned everyone. He looked directly at Sarah through the control tower window and picked up his radio. His voice was calm but urgent. "Captain Mitchell, prepare your aircraft for immediate launch. You're our last option." The control room fell silent. Every technician, every officer, everyone present stared at Sarah. The mockery in their eyes had been replaced by something else: fear. If Sarah's flying joke was their last hope, they were in serious trouble. Sarah felt her heart race as she ran toward her hangar. This was it. After months of ridicule and doubt, she would finally discover what her mysterious aircraft could really do. Climbing into the cockpit, she noticed something different about the instruments. Systems inactive during training flights were now online, displaying information she'd never seen. The strange gray aircraft rolled out of its hangar for the first time under combat conditions. Ground crews who had joked about it for months now watched in tense silence. Sarah could hear her own breathing inside her helmet as she awaited takeoff clearance. "Ghosthawk, you are cleared for immediate launch," came the voice from the tower. Sarah paused. Ghosthawk? That wasn't her aircraft's designation. But before she could ask, her training took over, and she pushed the throttles forward, accelerating down the runway toward an uncertain future. As Sarah's aircraft lifted off, something extraordinary happened. The moment her landing gear retracted, cockpit systems began activating in sequences she'd never experienced during training. Warning lights she'd never seen before flickered to life, not in alarm, but in preparation. "What the hell?" Sarah whispered, watching her display screens transform. New information appeared everywhere: advanced radar signatures, electromagnetic spectrum analysis, and targeting systems far beyond anything she trained on. It was like her aircraft had been hiding its true capabilities until this very moment. In the control tower, Colonel Wright stood with clenched hands behind his back. The other officers around him had stopped their usual chatter. They were witnessing something unprecedented, though they didn't yet understand it. "Sir," said Lieutenant Thompson, the radar operator, "I'm reading very unusual signatures from Captain Mitchell's aircraft. The electromagnetic profile it's like nothing I've seen before." Colonel Wright nodded grimly. "Keep monitoring, and Thompson, everything you see in the next hour is classified beyond your current clearance level." Meanwhile, the conventional fighter squadron still struggled with the enemy aircraft. Captain Harrison's voice crackled over the radio, frustration clear. "Control, this is Falcon Leader. We've lost visual contact again. These bogies are like smoke. Every time we get close, they just vanish." Sarah listened to the radio chatter as she climbed toward the intercept coordinates. She felt a mix of determination and fear. This was her chance to prove herself, but she was flying into combat with an aircraft whose capabilities remained a mystery. Reaching cruising altitude, Sarah saw something impossible on her radar. Not only could she see the enemy aircraft that had been evading everyone else, but she saw them clearly, continuously. Even when they activated their stealth systems, her aircraft's sensors penetrated their advanced concealment technology as if it didn't exist. "This can't be right," she told herself, double-checking her instruments, but the readings were consistent. Her aircraft was detecting and tracking 4 enemy stealth fighters invisible to everyone else. The enemy formation headed toward the city at high speed, seemingly confident no one could pursue them effectively. They had no idea that, for the first time, someone could see exactly where they were and what they were doing. Sarah opened her radio channel. "Control, this is Ghosthawk. I have visual contact with 4 enemy aircraft. They're maintaining formation, heading 270, altitude 35,000 feet. There was a long pause before Colonel Wright's voice returned. "Confirm, Ghosthawk, you have visual on bogies our entire squadron couldn't track?" "Confirmed, Control. Not only visual, but I have them locked on targeting systems. They have no idea I'm here." In the control tower, officers exchanged amazed glances. Lieutenant Thompson stared at his radar screen in disbelief. "Sir, it's like Captain Mitchell's aircraft doesn't exist on our scopes, but somehow she's tracking targets we can't even see consistently." What Sarah didn't know was that her aircraft had been designed using technology years ahead of anything else in military inventory. The strange matte gray coating wasn't just paint. It was a revolutionary material that absorbed and deflected radar waves, making the aircraft nearly invisible. The unusual angles and surfaces weren't design flaws, they were carefully calculated to scatter electromagnetic signatures. But the stealth technology was only part of the secret. The aircraft's sensors used quantum radar technology that could detect stealth aircraft by measuring quantum fluctuations in space. It was science that sounded like fiction, but it was very real and effective. As Sarah closed in on the enemy formation, she noticed something else remarkable. Despite flying at high speed and maneuvering aggressively, her jet was completely silent on enemy radar. The aircraft that had looked clumsy and awkward on the ground was actually a masterpiece of stealth engineering. The enemy pilots had no idea death was approaching them from behind. "Control, requesting permission to engage," Sarah radioed. "Ghosthawk, you are authorized to engage at your discretion. Take them down." Sarah's heart pounded as she prepared for her first real combat. All those months of training with seemingly overly complicated weapon systems suddenly made sense. Her aircraft wasn't just carrying ordinary missiles. The weapons bay held advanced projectiles designed specifically for engaging stealth targets. She selected her first target, the lead enemy aircraft. Her targeting computer locked on immediately, displaying the enemy plane's exact position, speed, and projected flight path. The lock was so solid it seemed impossible to break. "Fox 1. Sarah called out, launching her first missile. It streaked through the sky with incredible precision. The enemy pilot never saw it coming. His advanced stealth fighter, invisible to everyone else, exploded in a brilliant fireball that lit up the evening sky. The remaining 3 enemy pilots suddenly realized they were under attack, but they couldn't see their attacker. Their radars showed nothing. Their advanced detection systems found no threats. Yet one of their squadron was gone, destroyed by a ghost. Panic set in among the enemy formation. They began aggressive evasive maneuvers, breaking formation and trying desperately to locate the source of the attack. But Sarah's aircraft remained invisible to them, tracking their every move with ease. "Control. First target destroyed, engaging remaining bogies." In the control tower, cheers erupted from the normally disciplined officers. Colonel Wright allowed himself a small smile. The project he'd been overseeing in secret for 2 years was finally proving its worth. "Sir," Lieutenant Thompson said, his voice filled with awe, "whatever Captain Mitchell is flying, it's changing everything we thought we knew about air combat." Sarah lined up her second shot, feeling a confidence she'd never experienced. Her aircraft wasn't just superior to the enemy planes, it was superior to everything else in the sky. She was piloting the future of military aviation, and that future was devastating to anyone who stood against it. The second missile found its target with the same precision. Another enemy aircraft disappeared in flames, leaving only 2 survivors who were now fleeing in complete terror. No longer interested in their original mission, the 2 remaining enemy pilots flew in pure panic, abandoning all formation discipline as they tried to escape whatever invisible force hunted them. Sarah watched their erratic movements on her display, feeling a mix of professional satisfaction and genuine amazement at her aircraft's capabilities. "Control, 2 targets remaining. They're attempting to flee the area," Sarah reported, maintaining perfect, undetected position behind the enemy aircraft. "Ghosthawk, do not let them escape. We cannot allow them to report back on what they've encountered." Sarah understood the implications immediately. If these enemy pilots returned to their base with stories of an invisible aircraft that could track and destroy stealth fighters, it would compromise everything. The element of surprise that made her aircraft so effective would be lost. She accelerated to pursue the fleeing enemy planes. That's when she discovered another remarkable feature. Despite pushing the engines to maximum power, her jet remained completely silent on all electromagnetic spectrums. The enemy pilots had no way of knowing she was gaining on them rapidly. The third enemy pilot made a fatal mistake. In his panic, he turned directly into Sarah's line of sight, giving her a perfect targeting solution. She didn't hesitate. "Fox 2. The missile launch was flawless, and the explosion that followed lit up a second section of sky. 3 down, 1 to go. The final enemy pilot was now flying alone, probably radioing desperately to his base for instructions or support. Sarah could intercept his communications through her aircraft's advanced electronic warfare systems, but the transmissions were in a foreign language she didn't recognize. What she understood was the tone of desperation in the pilot's voice. He knew his squadron was gone, destroyed by something he couldn't see or understand. He was a skilled pilot flying an advanced aircraft, but he was completely helpless against technology he didn't know existed. Control, preparing to engage final target. Ghosthawk, hold position. Colonel Wright's voice cut through the radio. We're receiving new orders from command. Sarah maintained her pursuit, but held her fire. The enemy pilot was still fleeing, probably hoping to reach friendly airspace before whatever was hunting him could strike again. Ghosthawk, command wants the final target alive. They want to capture both pilot and aircraft for intelligence purposes. This was something Sarah hadn't trained for. Forcing an enemy aircraft to land without destroying it required a completely different approach. She needed to disable the plane without killing the pilot, then guide him to a landing site for capture. Control, I'm not sure how to proceed. My weapons are designed for destruction, not capture. Ghosthawk, your aircraft has capabilities you haven't been briefed on yet. Check your secondary weapon systems. Sarah looked at her control panel with new eyes. There were indeed systems she'd never been told about, marked with labels she didn't recognize. One section was marked Non-Lethal Engagement Systems. She'd assumed it was for training, but now realized it was for exactly this situation. She activated the secondary systems and watched new options appear on her targeting computer. Instead of explosive missiles, she could deploy electromagnetic pulse weapons designed to disable enemy aircraft electronics without destroying the plane. She could also release a specialized net system designed to entangle enemy aircraft and force them down. Incredible, Sarah whispered. Her aircraft wasn't just a fighter, it was a complete air superiority system with options for every possible scenario. The enemy pilot was now crossing into what would normally be considered safe airspace. But Sarah's aircraft had range capabilities far beyond conventional fighters. She could pursue him for hundreds of miles without needing to refuel. Control. I have a clean shot with electromagnetic pulse weapons, requesting permission to disable. Ghosthawk, you are authorized to disable target for capture. Sarah selected the EMP weapon and locked onto the fleeing aircraft. This required even more precision than a standard missile shot, as she needed to disable the plane's electronics without causing a crash that would kill the pilot. Fox 3, EMP deployment. The electromagnetic pulse weapon streaked through the sky, looking like a normal missile until it reached its target. Instead of exploding, it released a concentrated burst of electromagnetic energy that shut down every electronic system in the enemy aircraft. The enemy pilot suddenly found himself flying a dead stick. His engine stopped, his flight controls failed, and his communication systems went silent. His advanced stealth fighter became nothing more than a gliding piece of metal falling toward Earth. Sarah watched as the enemy pilot deployed his emergency systems and successfully ejected from his disabled aircraft. His parachute opened properly, and he began drifting toward the ground while his expensive stealth fighter crashed into an empty field below. Control, target pilot has ejected safely. Aircraft destroyed on impact with terrain. Pilot will be available for capture. Outstanding work, Ghosthawk. Ground teams are already en route to the landing site. As Sarah turned her aircraft toward home, she finally had time to process what had just happened. She had single-handedly defeated an entire squadron of advanced enemy stealth fighters using an aircraft everyone at her base had mocked for months. But more than that, she had discovered she was piloting technology so advanced it seemed like science fiction. Her aircraft could see invisible targets, remain completely undetected while engaging multiple enemies, and disable aircraft for capture rather than destruction. Control, requesting permission to return to base. Ghosthawk, permission granted. And Captain Mitchell, prepare for a very different reception than you're used to. As Sarah flew back toward Falcon Air Base, she could see other aircraft in the distance. The conventional fighters scrambled earlier were returning from their unsuccessful mission. Their pilots had no idea the problem they couldn't solve had been handled by the pilot they'd been mocking. She thought about Captain Harrison and the others who had called her aircraft a flying coffin and a garage project. In a few minutes they would learn her joke aircraft had accomplished what their entire squadron couldn't. The irony wasn't lost on her. All those months of ridicule and isolation had been protecting one of the military's most important secrets. Her aircraft wasn't a failed experiment or a training mistake. It was the most advanced fighter plane ever built. So secret that even she hadn't been told its true capabilities until the moment she needed them. As the lights of Falcon Air Base appeared in the distance, Sarah realized her life was about to change completely. She was no longer just another pilot. She was the pilot of the Ghosthawk, and that made her one of the most important military assets in the world. The landing pattern at Falcon Air Base was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Approaching the runway, she saw crowds of people gathered near the control tower and hangars. Word had spread quickly about what had happened, and everyone wanted to see the aircraft that had accomplished the impossible. Ghosthawk, you are cleared for landing on runway 09. Emergency vehicles are standing by as a precaution, the tower controller said, his voice carrying excitement rather than concern. As Sarah touched down, she noticed something that sent chills down her spine. Lined up along the taxiway were some of the most senior military officials she'd ever seen. Generals and admirals she recognized from news broadcasts stood beside black vehicles, waiting for her aircraft to stop. Even more surprising was the presence of civilian officials in expensive suits. These weren't ordinary government workers. These were people with security clearances most military personnel never knew existed. Chief Mechanic Rodriguez waited by her hangar, but he wasn't alone. Dozens of technicians and specialized gear prepared to service her aircraft. Sarah realized these weren't the regular base maintenance crew. These were specialists who had been standing by, probably for months, waiting for this exact moment. As Sarah shut down her engines and began her post-flight checklist, she could see the conventional fighter pilots who had returned from their failed mission. They stood in a group near the flight line, staring at her aircraft with expressions of complete bewilderment. Captain Harrison, who had mocked her flying coffin that very morning, looked like he'd seen a ghost. The realization that Sarah's supposedly inferior aircraft had succeeded where his entire squadron had failed was clearly written across his face. "Welcome back, Captain Mitchell," Colonel Wright said as Sarah climbed down. His tone was completely different from any previous conversation. There was respect in his voice now, mixed with what might have been relief. "Sir, I have to ask, what exactly have I been flying for the past 6 months?" "Something that didn't officially exist until tonight," Wright replied. "And something that will change the balance of power in the world." A woman in a civilian suit approached them. She was probably in her 50s, with gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge of very important things. When she spoke, even Colonel Wright seemed to defer to her authority. "Captain Mitchell, I'm Director Patricia Hawkins from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. What you've been piloting is the result of 15 years of development and $20 billion in research funding. Until tonight, only 12 people in the world knew it existed." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was learning. "Ma'am, why wasn't I told? Why was I kept in the dark about my own aircraft?" "Because we needed to know if the technology would work under real combat conditions with a pilot who wasn't influenced by expectations or preconceptions. We needed someone who would fly the aircraft naturally, react instinctively, and adapt to its capabilities without predetermined ideas about what was possible." Director Hawkins gestured toward a secure briefing room. "We also needed to maintain absolute secrecy. The enemy aircraft you encountered tonight were testing our conventional defenses, probing for weaknesses. They had no idea we possessed technology that could counter their stealth capabilities." As they walked toward the briefing room, Sarah could hear the other pilots talking in amazed whispers. Words like impossible and incredible kept coming up. The same people who had mocked her aircraft that morning were now trying to understand how it had accomplished what seemed like magic. "Captain Mitchell," Director Hawkins continued, "your aircraft represents a quantum leap in military technology. Its stealth capabilities are beyond anything our enemies possess. The sensor systems can detect aircraft invisible to conventional radar. The weapon systems can engage multiple targets simultaneously with unprecedented precision. Inside the briefing room, Sarah faced a wall of monitors displaying technical specifications that made her head spin. The aircraft she'd been flying was more advanced than anything she'd imagined possible. The quantum radar system, explained Dr. James Chin, one of the lead scientists on the project, can detect stealth aircraft by measuring disruptions in quantum fields. It's technology most people think is still theoretical, but we've made it practical and combat-ready. The stealth coating, added another scientist, isn't just radar-absorbing material. It actively manipulates electromagnetic waves, essentially making the aircraft invisible to multiple types of detection systems simultaneously. Sarah studied the technical diagrams, trying to understand the full scope of what she'd been flying. Why me? Why was I chosen to pilot this aircraft? Director Hawkins smiled. Because your psychological profile indicated you could handle the isolation and mockery necessary to maintain the cover story. Because your flight skills were exceptional enough to master the aircraft's capabilities. And because you demonstrated the ability to think clearly under pressure. We also needed someone the enemy wouldn't suspect, Colonel Wright added. If we'd assigned our most famous test pilots to this project, enemy intelligence would have noticed. By using a relatively unknown pilot and encouraging the perception that this was a failed experiment, we maintained perfect operational security. The briefing continued for hours. Sarah learned that her aircraft, officially designated the F-47 Ghosthawk, incorporated technologies that wouldn't appear in conventional military aircraft for decades. Everything from the engines to the flight control systems represented breakthrough engineering. The mission you completed tonight was more than a combat test, Director Hawkins explained. It was a demonstration that we possess capabilities our enemies can't counter. The captured pilot and the intelligence we gather from interrogating him will provide invaluable information about their stealth technology. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now, Captain Mitchell, you become the primary pilot for the most classified aircraft program in military history. You'll be trained on capabilities you haven't even seen yet, and you'll be prepared for missions that could determine the outcome of future conflicts. As the briefing concluded, Sarah realized her life had changed forever. She was no longer just another fighter pilot. She was the guardian of technology that could protect her country from threats conventional forces couldn't handle. Outside the briefing room, the base buzzed with activity. Security personnel established new protocols around her hangar. Scientists arrived to begin detailed analysis of her aircraft's performance. Intelligence officers prepared to interrogate the captured enemy pilot. But most importantly, the other pilots at Falcon Air Base looked at Sarah with new eyes. The woman they had mocked and dismissed was now the most important pilot on the base, flying the most advanced aircraft in the world. Captain Harrison approached her as she left the briefing room. The arrogance and mockery were gone from his expression, replaced by something Sarah had never seen before, genuine respect. Captain Mitchell, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. We all do. We had no idea what you were really doing here. Sarah nodded, understanding that everything had changed between her and her fellow pilots. You couldn't have known, Jake. That was the whole point. As she walked back to her quarters, Sarah looked up at the stars and realized tomorrow would bring challenges she couldn't yet imagine. She was now the pilot of the Ghosthawk, and the world was watching. 3 weeks after the successful mission, Sarah's world had completely transformed. Falcon Air Base had become the center of intense activity as military officials, scientists, and intelligence analysts worked around the clock to analyze the implications of the Ghosthawk's capabilities. The captured enemy pilot had provided crucial intelligence about advanced stealth technology developed by hostile nations. The interrogation revealed Sarah's opponents had been flying prototypes of aircraft they believed were undetectable by any existing technology. The shock of being defeated so completely had broken the pilot's confidence in his country's technical superiority. Captain Mitchell, report to Briefing Room Alpha. Came the announcement over the base communications system. Sarah had become accustomed to these urgent summons. Almost every day brought new developments, new missions, or new revelations about her aircraft's capabilities. In the briefing room, she found Director Hawkins waiting with several officials she didn't recognize. Their military uniforms bore insignia from different branches of service, suggesting a joint operation meeting of the highest importance. "Captain, we have a situation that requires the Ghosthawk's unique capabilities," Director Hawkins began. "Intelligence indicates enemy forces are planning a major operation using multiple stealth aircraft. Conventional forces would be helpless against this threat." General Patricia Morrison, whom Sarah recognized as one of the highest-ranking officers in the military, stepped forward. "Captain Mitchell, your success 3 weeks ago has changed our understanding of modern air warfare. The enemy believes they have technological superiority that makes them invincible. We need to prove them wrong." The mission briefing revealed a complex scenario. Enemy forces plan to use a formation of stealth aircraft to attack a critical military installation. Intelligence suggested they would deploy at least 8 advanced stealth fighters, far more than Sarah had faced in her first combat mission. "This isn't just about stopping one attack," explained Admiral Robert Chin. "This is about demonstrating that our technological capabilities can counter any threat they can deploy. If we succeed, it could prevent a larger conflict. If we fail, they'll believe they have military superiority, which could lead to aggressive action." Sarah studied the mission parameters on the display screens. The enemy formation would be larger, better coordinated, and operating over more challenging terrain than her previous engagement. They would also be prepared for advanced defensive systems, though they still didn't know the Ghosthawk existed. "Ma'am, this mission would require engaging 8 targets simultaneously while maintaining stealth profile. Is the Ghosthawk capable of handling that many opponents?" Dr. Chin, the lead scientist, smiled confidently. "Captain, you've only experienced about 30% of your aircraft's actual capabilities. The Ghosthawk was designed to engage multiple stealth targets in complex tactical situations. What you'll be using tomorrow makes your previous mission look like a training exercise." The technical briefing that followed revealed capabilities that seemed impossible. The Ghosthawk could deploy multiple types of weapons simultaneously, engage targets at ranges far beyond conventional aircraft, and coordinate attacks using artificial intelligence systems that could process tactical information faster than human pilots. "The quantum computing system," Dr. Chen explained, "can calculate optimal engagement sequences for multiple targets while maintaining your stealth profile and ensuring maximum mission success probability. You'll essentially be fighting with a computer that can think faster than any human opponent." But the most remarkable revelation was the Ghosthawk's ability to operate autonomously if necessary. If Sarah were disabled or killed during the mission, the aircraft could continue fighting on its own, using artificial intelligence to complete the mission objectives. "Captain, your role is to provide human judgment and tactical flexibility that artificial intelligence can't match," Director Hawkins explained. "But if something goes wrong, the Ghosthawk will ensure the mission succeeds even without pilot input." The training for this advanced mission began immediately. Sarah spent hours in simulation systems that revealed capabilities she'd never known existed. Her aircraft could deploy decoy systems to confuse enemy pilots, electronic warfare packages that could disable entire formations, and weapon systems that could engage multiple targets with single shots. "This is incredible," Sarah said during one training session. "It's like flying a spacecraft instead of an aircraft." "The Ghosthawk represents 21st century technology in an age where most military systems are still based on 20th century thinking," replied Colonel Martinez, her new training officer. "What you're piloting is essentially a prototype for the future of warfare." Meanwhile, intelligence reports continued to confirm the enemy was proceeding with their planned attack. They had assembled their most advanced stealth aircraft and their best pilots, confident their technological superiority would guarantee success. What they didn't know was that their attack plans had been intercepted and analyzed. Every aspect of their strategy had been studied and countered. The Ghosthawk mission wasn't just about stopping their attack, it was about demonstrating technological dominance so complete that future attacks would become unthinkable. Captain Mitchell, General Morrison said during the final briefing, this mission could determine the balance of power for decades to come. Success here could prevent a war that might otherwise be inevitable. The weight of responsibility was enormous. Sarah realized she wasn't just defending against one attack. She was potentially preventing a much larger conflict that could cost thousands of lives. On the night before the mission, Sarah walked around her aircraft in the hangar. The Ghosthawk no longer looked strange or awkward to her. She could see the elegance in its design, the purpose behind every unusual angle and surface. What had once seemed like an inferior aircraft now appeared to be exactly what it was. The most advanced fighting machine ever created. Chief Mechanic Rodriguez approached her. Captain, the aircraft is ready for tomorrow's mission. Every system has been tested and optimized. You're flying the most perfectly prepared aircraft in military history. Rodriguez, can I ask you something? How long have you known what this aircraft really was? The chief mechanic smiled. From the first day you arrived, Captain, but watching you discover its capabilities has been one of the most remarkable experiences of my career. Tomorrow, you're going to show the world what American engineering can accomplish. As Sarah prepared for sleep, she thought about how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been just another pilot. Tomorrow, she would be leading a mission that could change the course of history. The enemy believed their stealth technology made them invincible. They were about to discover that someone had developed technology that made their advantages irrelevant. The Ghosthawk was about to demonstrate that the future of warfare belonged to whoever could innovate fastest and think beyond conventional limitations. Sarah fell asleep knowing that when she woke up, she would be preparing for the most important mission of her career. Flying an aircraft that represented the pinnacle of human technological achievement against opponents who had no idea what they were about to face. The mission began before dawn. Sarah arrived at the hangar to find the Ghosthawk surrounded by more activity than she'd ever seen. Teams of specialists conducted final systems checks, loaded advanced weapons, and prepared equipment she'd never seen before. Good morning, Captain, Director Hawkins said, approaching with a coffee cup and a serious expression. Intelligence confirms the enemy formation is proceeding as expected. 8 aircraft, their best pilots, flying their most advanced stealth fighters. They're confident this attack will demonstrate their technological superiority. Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully. Any last-minute changes to the mission plan? Just one enhancement. We're deploying the Ghosthawk's experimental swarm missile system for the first time in combat. Instead of engaging targets one at a time, you'll be able to engage all 8 simultaneously. Dr. Chen appeared with a tablet displaying the new weapon system specifications. Captain, each swarm missile contains 12 smaller guided projectiles. When you fire, the missile will split into multiple warheads that can each seek different targets. You'll essentially be firing 96 guided weapons in a single launch. The technical implications were staggering. Sarah realized she would be piloting a single aircraft with the firepower of an entire squadron. The enemy formation, despite their advanced technology and superior numbers, would be facing odds they couldn't possibly understand. The artificial intelligence system will coordinate the swarm attack. Dr. Chen continued. Your job is to position the aircraft optimally and authorize the engagement. The computer will handle targeting, trajectory calculation, and ensuring every enemy aircraft is destroyed simultaneously. As Sarah completed her pre-flight inspection, she could see other aircraft on the base preparing for supporting roles. Conventional fighters would be positioned to intercept any enemy aircraft that might escape, though intelligence suggested this was unlikely. Captain Mitchell, Colonel Wright said, approaching with final mission orders. Command wants you to know that this mission has approval at the highest levels. You're authorized to use any of the Ghosthawk's capabilities necessary to ensure complete mission success. The takeoff was smooth, but as Sarah climbed toward the intercept coordinates, she felt the weight of history on her shoulders. This wasn't just another combat mission. This was a demonstration that would determine whether hostile nations believed they could challenge American military technology. Ghosthawk, this is Control. Enemy formation is proceeding on schedule. 8 aircraft in attack formation heading toward target Bravo. You are cleared to intercept and engage at your discretion. Sarah activated the Ghosthawk's advanced sensor systems and immediately began detecting the enemy formation. They flew in perfect tactical formation, confident in their stealth technology, completely unaware they were being tracked by systems they didn't know existed. Control, I have all 8 targets on my display. They're maintaining attack formation, proceeding toward the target area. No indication they're aware of my presence. Ghosthawk, you are authorized to engage when ready. Eliminate all targets. Sarah positioned her aircraft for optimal engagement angle. The enemy formation was flying in a tight group, which would actually work to her advantage when using the swarm missile system. A single launch point would allow her to engage all targets simultaneously. Control. Preparing to engage with experimental swarm system. All targets locked. Sarah watched as her targeting computer analyzed the enemy formation and calculated optimal attack vectors for each individual warhead. The artificial intelligence processed thousands of variables simultaneously: target speed, direction, defensive capabilities, and optimal impact points. Ghosthawk, you are cleared to fire when ready. Sarah took a deep breath and activated the swarm missile system. Control, Fox 4. Swarm deployment initiated. The missile launch was unlike anything she'd experienced before. A single large missile deployed from her aircraft, then split into 12 smaller projectiles. Each of those projectiles contained 8 guided warheads, creating a cloud of 96 individual weapons, all seeking different targets. On her display, Sarah watched as the swarm coordinated its attack with artificial intelligence precision. Some warheads targeted aircraft engines, others targeted cockpits, still others targeted fuel systems. The computer ensured every enemy aircraft would be destroyed completely and simultaneously. The enemy pilots never knew what hit them. In the space of 5 seconds, their entire formation was eliminated by an attack they couldn't see coming from an aircraft they couldn't detect. 8 of their most advanced stealth fighters, piloted by their best aviators, simply disappeared from the sky. Control. All targets destroyed. Complete mission success. No enemy survivors. In the control tower, where the atmosphere was electric with amazement and relief, military officials from multiple countries were present as observers, witnessing a demonstration of technological superiority that would reshape international military balance. Ghosthawk, outstanding performance, returned to base immediately for debriefing. As Sarah flew back toward Falcon Air Base, she realized this mission would have consequences far beyond immediate tactical success. Enemy intelligence agencies would soon discover their most advanced stealth aircraft had been completely defeated by a single opposing fighter. The psychological impact would be enormous. Military planners who had believed their stealth technology provided an invincible advantage would now have to reconsider their entire strategic approach. The balance of power had shifted dramatically in a single 5-second engagement. Control, requesting permission to demonstrate low-level stealth capabilities during landing approach. Ghosthawk, permission granted. Show our observers what they're witnessing. Sarah descended to treetop level and approached the base using terrain following flight patterns that demonstrated the Ghosthawk's ability to remain undetected even during aggressive maneuvering. The aircraft flew through radar coverage areas without appearing on any detection systems. As she landed, Sarah could see the observation area was packed with military officials from allied nations. Word of the mission's success had spread quickly, and everyone wanted to see the aircraft that had just redefined modern air warfare. The post-mission briefing revealed the full scope of what had been accomplished. Intelligence intercepts showed enemy military leadership was in complete confusion about how their attack had failed. Their most advanced aircraft had simply vanished without any indication of what had destroyed them. Captain Mitchell, General Morrison said, "Your mission today has prevented what intelligence suggests could have been the beginning of a larger conflict." Enemy leadership believed their stealth technology gave them decisive military advantage. That belief has been shattered. Director Hawkins added, "The strategic implications will unfold over months and years. But today's success has likely prevented a war that could have cost thousands of lives." As Sarah left the briefing room, she encountered Captain Harrison and several other pilots from her squadron. The pilots who had once mocked her aircraft now looked at her with something approaching awe. "Captain Mitchell," Harrison said formally, "I want to apologize again for our previous behavior. We had no idea we were witnessing the development of the most important military technology in decades." Sarah nodded, understanding that relationships at the base would never be the same. She was no longer just another pilot. She was the guardian of technology that had just changed the balance of world power. 6 months after the decisive mission, Falcon Air Base had become the most important military installation in the world. The success of the Ghosthawk program had led to a complete transformation of military strategy and international relations. Sarah stood in her new office looking out at a hangar complex that now housed 12 Ghosthawk aircraft. She was no longer just a pilot. She was the commander of the world's first quantum stealth squadron, training elite pilots from allied nations on technology that had revolutionized warfare. "Colonel Mitchell," her aide announced, "the Secretary of Defense is here for the ceremony." Her promotion to colonel had come with the successful completion of her mission. More importantly, she had been chosen to lead the expansion of the Ghosthawk program, training pilots who would protect democratic nations worldwide. The ceremony that day would mark the graduation of the first international class of Ghosthawk pilots. Representatives from 12 allied countries had spent months learning to operate the advanced aircraft, and today they would return to their home nations with technology that would ensure collective security for decades. "Colonel Mitchell," Secretary of Defense Patricia Williams said as she arrived, "this program represents more than just advanced military technology. It represents the future of international cooperation and defense." The diplomatic implications of the Ghosthawk program had been as important as the military ones. By sharing the technology with trusted allies, the United States had created a network of nations capable of defending against any technological threat. "Ma'am, the pilots have exceeded every expectation," Sarah replied. "They've mastered not just the technical aspects of the aircraft, but the strategic thinking necessary to use this technology responsibly." The enemy nations that had once threatened American interests with their stealth technology had become much more cooperative in international negotiations. The knowledge that their most advanced aircraft could be easily defeated had led to a dramatic shift in their diplomatic approach. Intelligence reports indicated that several hostile nations had abandoned their advanced stealth aircraft programs entirely, recognizing they couldn't compete with quantum radar technology. The arms race that had been building for decades had ended with decisive American technological superiority. "Colonel, the President wanted me to convey his personal gratitude for your service," Secretary Williams continued. "Your success has prevented what analysts believe could have been a catastrophic conflict involving multiple nations." As they walked toward the ceremony area, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed. The pilot who had been mocked for flying a garage project was now responsible for the most advanced military program in human history. The graduation ceremony included pilots from Britain, France, Germany, Japan, Australia, and other key allies. Each would return home with a Ghosthawk aircraft and the knowledge to train additional pilots in their own countries. "Today, we're not just celebrating the graduation of exceptional pilots," Sarah addressed the assembled group. "We're celebrating the creation of a defensive network that will protect democratic values and peaceful nations for generations to come." The enemy pilot captured during her first mission had eventually provided intelligence leading to a complete understanding of hostile stealth technology. Ironically, his defeat had contributed to the very defensive capabilities that now made aggression impossible for his country. Captain Harrison, who had once mocked her aircraft, was now one of her deputy commanders and an enthusiastic advocate for the Ghosthawk program. The transformation in attitudes at the base had been complete and permanent. "Colonel Mitchell," he said during the reception following the ceremony, "I often think about how different things might have been if we'd understood what you were doing from the beginning." "Jake," Sarah replied, "the secrecy was necessary for the program's success. If enemy intelligence had suspected what we were developing, they might have found ways to counter it before we could deploy it effectively." Director Hawkins, who had overseen the program from its inception, approached with news that the program would be expanding even further. "Colonel, we've received authorization to begin training pilots for the next generation Ghosthawk. The technology we'll be deploying in 5 years will make today's aircraft look primitive." The continuous advancement of technology meant American military superiority would only increase. The scientific teams that had developed the Ghosthawk were already working on capabilities that seemed like science fiction. "Ma'am, what's the timeline for the advanced systems? The first next-generation aircraft should be ready for testing within 2 years. We're looking at capabilities that include space-based operations, underwater deployment, and tactical invisibility that goes beyond just radar stealth." As the ceremony concluded and the international pilots prepared to return home, Sarah realized her role in history was just beginning. The Ghosthawk program had prevented one conflict, but maintaining peace would require continuous technological advancement and international cooperation. That evening, Sarah walked alone through the hangar where her original Ghosthawk was displayed as a monument to the program's success. The aircraft that had once been mocked as a failure was now recognized as one of the most important technological achievements in military history. Chief Mechanic Rodriguez, now the Chief of Advanced Systems Maintenance, joined her in front of the historic aircraft. "Colonel, it's hard to believe this all started with people making jokes about your flying coffin." "Rodriguez," Sarah replied, "sometimes the most important work happens when nobody's paying attention. The mockery and secrecy weren't obstacles to success. They were essential parts of it." The success of the Ghosthawk program had created a new model for military development. By maintaining absolute secrecy during development and testing, then demonstrating overwhelming superiority in actual combat, the program had achieved deterrent effects far beyond what conventional military buildups could accomplish. Enemy nations now faced a choice: pursue expensive and ultimately futile attempts to match American technology, or focus their resources on peaceful development and international cooperation. Most had chosen cooperation. "Colonel Mitchell," came an announcement over the hangar communication system. "You have a priority message from the Pentagon." The message revealed Sarah had been selected to lead an even more advanced program. The Ghosthawk's success had led to approval for technologies that would extend military superiority into space, underwater operations, and cyber warfare. As Sarah read the classified documents outlining her new responsibilities, she realized her journey from mock pilot to military leader was far from over. The Ghosthawk had been just the beginning of a technological revolution that would reshape not just military affairs, but the entire relationship between nations. The aircraft that everyone had mocked had become the foundation for a new era of peace through technological superiority. Sarah Mitchell, the pilot who had endured months of ridicule, had become the guardian of humanity's most advanced defensive capabilities. Looking at her reflection in the polished surface of the original Ghosthawk, Sarah smiled at the irony. Sometimes the most important victories come from battles nobody knows you're fighting. And sometimes being underestimated is the greatest advantage you can have. The future was secure, protected by technology that had emerged from secrecy, perseverance, and the courage to trust in capabilities others couldn't see or understand. The Ghosthawk had changed everything, and Colonel Sarah Mitchell would continue leading that change into whatever challenges lay ahead.